Alright, so we're starting to have more fun here. We're getting close to being able to hit our guys. Starting with that, we're going to need to move on to our weapons and whatnot. And I set up a socket. You don't need to do this, especially not with the engine being as awesome as it is. But if you do want to do it, if your window's not showing, just go in here and Socket Manager and hit Create Socket. You'll name it whatever you want it to be, and you get to place it wherever you want with this moving widget, which is awesome. And I just do that to kind of keep everything in the spot that I want it to be. But you don't have to do that, because when you're under here in Vorpal, when you're under here in your static meshes or whatever, you can just move them here as well, which is really about the same thing. What I do is set up a collision capsule, and like I said, you can move that around if you want. To set up a collision capsule, and that's what we're going to do to register that you've hit somebody. That's what's going to handle all the collision. I'm not doing it off of the actual static mesh. You'll just hit capsule and add one in there, and you'll end up with this here. And you'll see that mine is huge, absolutely huge. Not only is it a large sword, but I just want to make sure that the player never feels like I cheated them out of a hit or anything like that. So it tends to be quite a bit larger than the actual mesh, but I'm okay with that. And you can move that around once again with this, so you don't have to do a socket, but I did anyways. And from there, you'll just choose what socket in the parent socket there. That's after you grab the capsule and you drag it on top of here, then it'll be part of it, and then you can use the socket to go to exactly where you want. Going down this list, you'll set up the size through here, the radius and the length or height or whatever. I don't have any physics because it doesn't need to, move or anything. It's just going to be stuck there forever. It's hidden in game. No one ever needs to see it. I'm actually going to turn that away now. The biggest thing that you'll need for sure is generate overlap events. That's just to make sure that it actually even knows that it's overlapping something. And then you'll need to set up what kind of type it is, because that's important for what kind of type you'll be dealing with later. I set it up under vehicle. Now, I did have its own object channel before, and you can do that as well. It's in your project settings, I think. Editor or project settings under collision. You can add your own. Now, the reason why I don't have it anymore is because every time you upgrade to a new engine, it disappears, and then your stuff doesn't work, and that just bothers me. And I don't need all these channels, and I just don't want to go through all that work. Maybe later on they'll figure out a way that it won't disappear on me every time we upgrade the engine, but for right now that's just too much work. Let me just go ahead and set up my Vorpals, which it used to be called, under vehicle, and I know it'll be there next time we upgrade. And I use physics bodies as my TW enemy, which was another channel that I used to have. So in the capsule collision, I have it to make sure that it can overlap with vehicle, which is my Vorpals. I'll just have to remember. I wish I could do my own channels, but it's just too much work to deal with that. And I have all this under ignore because I don't want it being all the time. I don't want her just running past someone, hitting this, and taking damage. So I'll tell it when to take damage later. So yeah, that's that. Just make sure that when we tell it later, we'll be crossing over with physics bodies, and that's set up in that as well. I use this complex one, and I also use the multi-body overlap, but I'm not 1000% sure it's necessary or needed. And lastly, I make sure that any character can't step on it, because it's just a collision box that's invisible. I don't need anyone standing on that. From there, in the graph, we need to set up what happens when it overlaps an enemy. It's not in here like majority of these little things here, these nodes. It's not going to be in there. What you have to do is you have to come over to the actual thing here in the variables, and it's right here. And under events, you'll add an event. And I already have it existing, so mine's down here, but I think yours will be up here. And you just want to do a begin overlap, and you'll get one of these here. In the begin overlap, you'll just drag off your actor, and we're going to have to cast. We'll be casting over to our TW enemy, or whatever you named your enemies here. and you get one of these. And what we'll be doing mostly is just from that enemy telling them to take damage. That's ultimately what we're trying to do when we overlap them. Just mentioning, I'm gonna delete this. I don't need it. It's never caused me problems, but just mentioning, just so someone has it in their mind in case you do come across it later. Just make sure you don't collide with yourself. I don't know if that's something that this does. I've never had a problem with it, but just a nice thought in case you run into problems at some point while creating your game. Just make sure things don't collide with yourself first. The big thing that happens with the swing is, I don't know if it's the space in between or if it just doesn't work that quickly, but basically I think it's like you'll hit here, you hit this space, and you'll hit here again, and that'll register as 2 hits, and I don't want that. I just want 1 hit for the swing. So to do that, what I do is I take whoever I hit and I add them to an array. An array, I'll find it here. To set up an array, you'll just hit a variable here. There it is. It's just set up a variable, and in the variable type, I set it under TW enemy because that's everything I'm going to hit that I need to have an array for. You'll just set it up under your blueprint, and I just add their name from here to here. Add their name every time I hit them. And then if it hits them twice, we come through here, and it says, well, in this array, do you already have their name? Yes. Do nothing. I don't need to take any more damage from them, take any more life from them. I just need to do it the once. So I just check to make sure they're in an array, and then I clear this at the end of every swing. And then from there, we're just sending out to take damage. Now that's that thing we set up before. This is always going to be the large Vorpal with this collision channel. So it's always going to be a certain amount of damage. In this case, it's 30. And the style is always going to be whether or not she has a small weapon or a large weapon, and then the damage type, that's going to be how they take their damage, whether they go flying back or not. And that's just, once again, all through here. All we're doing is simply calling this and telling the one enemy that we've hit to take the damage that we're sending back to them. From there, we need to turn on tracing. Now that's going to happen every time we take a swing, and that's start Vorpal trace. Just set up a function that says start Vorpal trace here, and then in your character blueprint, we're going to need to set up another animal notify. I forgot about this part, so I didn't already have it set up, but it's no problem. We can find it real quick here, and we'll go to the large swings because we've been working with those. And here, to set up the trace, it's just another simple animal notify. I showed these off a little earlier and said we'd come back to them, and here we are. And it's just simply, right click, add start Vorpal trace, and also in Vorpal trace, and I just have it, once the swing begins, it starts right there, and when it ends there. And it's just because I don't want all this here attacking an enemy. So I tell it when to start the Vorpal trace. And then from there, you'll just do the same thing, cast to your character, and find the start Vorpal trace, or whatever yours is called. I clear the enemy array every time we start one. This way, we start fresh, and any new enemies will take damage. And then for me, I switch on here, and I do the particle. I turn that on, and that one was attached to mine as well, under the same socket. But however you go about yours is maybe completely different. And from there, same thing, end it. That's based on here. You will probably, and maybe you won't have as many weapons as mine, but if you do, you'll probably switch it like I do. But if not, then you simply have to go from here to here, and that's turning on the collision capsule, the one that we just set up, and picking a channel. For me, once again, my enemy's under physics bodies, and saying that overlap now is on. And that's just saying we can receive an overlap from a physics body when we cross it, and then turning it to ignore when we're done. That's about it. Actually, I'll set up a spawning an enemy too, because that's just going to be way easier for you to be able to hit something. So we'll check into spawning an enemy. For me, spawning an enemy is simply just picking a random location on the map that I like them to spawn from. I just put an item there, static mesh, got its location, and plugged it into here. Just copied those things. It's just so I know where it was on the level. Otherwise, it'd be who knows where they're gonna spawn. I set up to my gamepad down because I'm not using that button currently. Get a random point in a radius, just so they're not spawning in the exact same spot when I spawn multiple of them. I get to look at rotation, so they're looking at me when they pop out from the character. Break the rotation, you only want the yaw. You don't need them looking up or down. At least not all of them. They turn really funny. It's kind of silly. Make a transform, and then mostly you're looking at this. Just spawn actor. It's that simple. It's a pretty simple node. You'll find it here. Spawn actor from class. And I'm using my Kendo, and they're based off a TW enemy. I'll go into that later about how to kind of keep creating your enemies off of one. This way you can kind of have all the same information, or at least the base information. The class system's really nice on this. And more importantly, that you need to spawn a default controller, and that's just a brain. You can literally use the actual default controller. It doesn't matter much from the game. In your enemies, whatever's already sitting in there will be just fine. And that should just about do it. From there, you should be able to calculate hits when you actually hit your enemy. You should be able to calculate hits when you actually hit your enemies, and you should be able to see them die when their life actually ends up like that. Ends up below 0. I think that'll do it for now. Let me know if there was any mistakes in here. I didn't actually follow along with you guys, so hopefully I covered everything. But if not, hit me up with a question. I'll solve whatever the problem is. But that should do it for now. We'll move on to actually getting the enemies to move around and maybe try and attack you back next time. Thanks.